respected. Listen carefully because this might change the way you see love, silence, and your own worth forever. The moment you stop chasing, stop explaining, and stop proving yourself is the exact moment he begins to feel something he's been avoiding all along, the fear of losing you. I want you to understand something deeply, the way Steve Harvey often expresses it through his life lessons. A man does not truly value what he thinks will always be there. Not because he's evil, not because he's evil, not because he doesn't care, but because human nature is wired to notice absence louder than presence. See, you've been taught the wrong way to hold on to someone. You've been told to communicate more, to explain your feelings, to fight for the relationship, to prove your loyalty. And while those things sound right on the surface, they often lead you into a trap where you slowly lose yourself while trying to keep someone else. Because here's the truth nobody tells you: the more you try to convince someone of your worth, the less they feel it. There is a quiet power in a woman who knows her value without needing to announce it. A calm strength in someone who doesn't beg to be chosen because she has already chosen herself. And that's where everything begins to change. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine a woman who used to reply instantly, who used to check her phone constantly, who used to rearrange her life just to be available. Now imagine that same woman, still kind, still respectful, but no longer chasing, no longer over-explaining, no longer seeking validation. She didn't become cold. She didn't become distant. She simply became centered. And that shift, that subtle, almost invisible shift, is what creates a storm in a man's mind. Because now, for the first time, he has to wonder. He starts asking himself questions he never asked before. Why is she not reacting the same way? Why is she not reaching out like before? Why does it feel like she's slipping away? And that right there, that feeling is the beginning of fear. Not the kind of fear that comes from threats or ultimatums. This is deeper. This is the fear of realizing that something valuable is no longer guaranteed. You see, when you talk too much, when you explain too much, when you try to make him understand your importance, you remove the mystery. You remove the space where realization is supposed to grow. A man doesn't truly understand your value when you tell him. He understands it when he feels your absence. And that's why silence becomes your strongest voice. But I want to be clear about something, because this is where many people get it wrong. This is not about playing games. This is not about manipulation. This is not about punishing someone by ignoring them. This is about alignment. It's about aligning your actions with your self-worth. Because when you truly value yourself, you naturally stop overgiving. You naturally stop chasing. You naturally stop accepting less than you deserve. And when that happens, something powerful shifts in the dynamic. He no longer feels like he has you secured no matter what. He no longer feels like he can show up halfway and still keep you fully. He no longer feels like your world revolves around him. And suddenly, you become something he has to earn again. Let me tell you something that might hit you hard. The reason he's not afraid of losing you right now is because he doesn't believe he will. Not because you're not valuable, but because your actions have been telling him that no matter what he does, you'll still be there. Think about that. Every time you double text, every time you excuse his behavior, every time you lower your standards just to keep the peace, you're silently teaching him that losing you is not a real consequence. And people don't fear losing something they believe is permanent. So what do? You don't argue. You don't threaten. You don't beg for attention. You simply change the way you show up. You become less available to what disrespects you and more devoted to what fulfills you. You stop making him the center of your life and start making yourself the priority again. And here's where it gets interesting. The moment you stop trying to be everything for him is the moment he starts noticing everything about you. Your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. Your silence becomes heavier than your words ever were. Your independence becomes more attractive than your attention ever was. Because now he has to lean in to feel you instead of leaning back and expecting you to come closer. And that shift, that psychological shift, is what creates desire, respect, and yes, fear. Not fear of you hurting him, not fear of conflict, but fear of losing access to someone rare. Because let's be honest, real, loyal, emotionally invested people are not easy to find. And deep down, he knows that. But he won't realize it fully until you stop reminding him of it. That's the paradox. The more you try to show someone your worth, the less they see it. The more you quietly live in your worth, the more they feel it. And that's where your power lies, not in what you say, but in what you stop saying, not in what you do for him, but in what you stop doing at the cost of yourself. Because at the end of the day, respect is not something you ask for. It's something you demonstrate through your standards. And once those standards become clear, once your actions start matching your self-worth, everything begins to shift, not just in him, but in you. Because now you're no longer acting out of fear of losing him. You're acting from a place of knowing that you will never lose yourself again. And that is where true power begins. Now, let me take you a little deeper into this, because once you begin this journey, something unexpected starts happening inside you. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You feel the urge to text him, to check on him, to go back to your old patterns. Your mind starts playing tricks on you, whispering, what if he forgets you? What if he moves on? What if this silence pushes him away? And that's the moment most people break. That's the moment they run back to what feels familiar, even if it hurts them. But listen carefully, that discomfort you feel is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're finally breaking a habit that was slowly breaking you. You've been conditioned to seek validation from his attention. You've been conditioned to feel secure only when he responds, when he shows interest, when he chooses you in visible ways. So when that pattern is interrupted, your mind panics. But growth always feels unfamiliar in the beginning. And this is where you have to become stronger than your emotions. Because if you go back too soon, if you return to chasing, explaining, and overgiving, you reset everything. You teach him once again that your silence doesn't last, that your standards are flexible, that your absence is temporary, and the fear you were creating disappears. You see, fear of losing you doesn't come from one moment of silence. It comes from consistency. It comes from a new pattern that he cannot predict. It comes from you becoming someone who no longer tolerates being taken for granted. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman who gave everything to a man, her time, her energy, her attention. She was always there, always available, always understanding. And for a while, it felt like love. But slowly, without even realizing it, she became predictable. He knew she would answer. He knew she would forgive. He knew she would stay. So he stopped trying, not because he didn't care at all, but because he didn't feel the need to. And then one day, something changed. She didn't argue. She didn't accuse. She didn't even explain much. She just shifted. She started focusing on her own life again. She invested in her growth, her peace, her happiness, respected him, but she stopped prioritizing him over herself. At first, he didn't notice much. Then he noticed she wasn't as available. Then he noticed she wasn't reacting the same way. Then he noticed she was no longer chasing, and that's when it hit him. For the first time, he felt unsure. For the first time, he wondered if she might actually walk away. For the first time, he felt what she had been feeling all along. And that realization didn't come from her words. It came from her change in behavior. That's the power of silent transformation. You don't need to announce your worth. You don't need to declare your independence. You don't need to give speeches about how you deserve better. You simply live it. And when you live it, people feel it, because energy doesn't lie. When you're chasing, your energy feels needy. When you're overgiving, your energy feels imbalanced. When you're afraid of losing someone, your energy reflects that fear. But when you're grounded, when you're focused on your own life, when you're at peace with yourself, your energy becomes magnetic. And suddenly the same person who took you for granted starts paying attention. But here's something important you need to understand. This is not about making him come back. This is not about making him chase you. This is about becoming someone who no longer needs to chase anyone. Because when you reach that level, everything changes. You stop settling for crumbs. You stop accepting inconsistent behavior. You stop ignoring red flags just because you're emotionally attached. And that's when you become truly powerful. Because now, whether he steps up or not, you win. Either he realizes your value and meets you at your level, or he doesn't and you walk away with your dignity intact. But in both cases, you don't lose yourself. And that's the real victory. Let me tell you something that Steve Harvey often emphasizes in his own way. A man respects what he has to work for. If everything comes easy, if your attention is always available, if your presence is guaranteed, there's no urgency, no appreciation, no depth. But when your time becomes valuable, when your attention becomes selective, when your presence becomes something that must be earned, that's when he starts to step up, because now he sees you differently. Not as someone who will always be there no matter what, but as someone he could actually lose. And losing you now feels real. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Not everyone will step up. Some people will let you go. Some people will choose comfort over growth. Some people will walk away instead of rising to meet your standards. And that's okay. Because those are the people who are never meant to stay in your life at a higher level. Your silence doesn't just create fear in the right person, it also reveals the wrong one. It shows you who values you and who only values your availability. So don't be afraid of what your silence might expose. Don't be afraid of losing someone who only stayed because you made it easy for them. Because the right person, the one who truly sees your worth, will not run from your standards. They will rise to meet them. And that's when you'll realize this was never about making him fear losing you. This was about becoming someone who is no longer afraid of losing him. And once you reach that point, you don't need to say a word, because everything about you already speaks. Now, something even deeper begins to unfold, because once you truly step into this silence, once you stop chasing and start choosing yourself, you begin to notice a shift not just in him, but in the way the entire world responds to you. People start treating you differently, not because you demanded respect, but because your presence now demands it. There is a quiet confidence that forms when you no longer feel the need to explain your worth. A calm authority in the way you carry yourself when you're no longer trying to be liked, but instead choosing to be respected. And this is where most people misunderstand the concept of making someone fear losing you. They think it's about distance. They think it's about ignoring messages, delaying replies, acting cold or unavailable. But that's not real power. That's performance. And performance always fades. Real power is consistency and self-respect. It's waking up every day and choosing not to abandon yourself just to keep someone else. It's looking at your own reflection and saying, I will not trade my peace for temporary attention. Because let me tell you something, attention is cheap. Anyone can give attention. But respect is earned through boundaries. And boundaries don't come from what you say. They come from what you allow. There was a time when you allowed too much. You allowed late replies to feel normal. You allowed inconsistency to feel acceptable. You allowed effort to be one-sided, not because you're weak, but because you cared. And caring is not a weakness, but caring without boundaries is. So now you're learning something new. You're learning to care without losing yourself. You're learning to love without lowering your standards. You're learning to give without overgiving. And that balance is what creates real emotional impact. Because now when you step back, it doesn't feel like a game. It feels like a shift. It feels real. And that's what makes it powerful. Let me take you inside his mind for a moment. When you used to chase, he felt secure. When you used to explain, he felt in control. When you used to overgive, he felt comfortable. But now he feels something different. Now he feels uncertainty. Now he feels curiosity. Now he feels the absence of something he got used to. And the human mind does something very interesting. When something familiar disappears, it focuses on it. It replays memories. It questions decisions. It starts to value what it once overlooked. And suddenly he's thinking about you more than before. Not because you said something powerful, but because you stopped saying everything. Silence creates space. And in that space, realization grows. He starts remembering the way you supported him, the way you listened, the way you cared. Things he once took for granted now begin to feel rare. And that's when fear quietly enters. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. What if I lose her for real? What if she's moving on? What if I don't get this version of her back? And here's where you must be very careful. Because this is the stage where many people get tempted to go back. The moment he reaches out a little more, the moment he shows a bit more interest, the moment he starts giving small signs of effort, you feel relief, you feel validation, you feel like it's working, and then you go back to your old self. You start overgiving again. You start being too available again. You start lowering your standards again. And just like that, the fear disappears. Listen, consistency is what creates respect. If your boundaries only exist when you're upset, they won't be taken seriously. If your silence only lasts a few days, it won't create lasting impact. If your self-worth depends on his behavior, it won't feel real to him or to you. You have to become stable in your standards. You have to become grounded in your value, not for him, but for yourself. Because the moment your self-respect becomes non-negotiable, everything changes permanently. And this is exactly what Steve Harvey tries to explain in his own way. You teach people how to treat you by what you accept. If you accept inconsistency, you will receive inconsistency. If you accept minimal effort, you will receive minimal effort. But if you stand firm in your standards, if you calmly walk away from what doesn't align, if you choose peace over attention, you create a new standard. And now, anyone who wants to be in your life has to meet it. And that's where the real shift happens. Because now, it's not about making him fear losing you. It's about making yourself unavailable to being undervalued. And when you reach that level, you don't need to chase. You don't need to convince. You don't need to explain. Because the right energy will come to you and the wrong energy will fall away. And here's the most powerful part of all: even if he doesn't change, even if he doesn't come back, even if he doesn't step up, you will still be in a better place. Because now you're no longer waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And once you do that, you realize something incredible. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And that realization, that deep, quiet understanding, is what sets you free. And now we arrive at the part most people never reach, because it requires something deeper than patience, deeper than strategy, deeper than silence. It requires transformation, not the kind you pretend for a few days, not the kind you perform so but someone notices, but the kind that changes who you are at your core. Because here's the truth: you cannot make someone fear losing you if you are still afraid of losing them. Read that again in your heart. As long as your decisions are driven by fear of abandonment, fear of being alone, fear of starting over, you will always find yourself compromising, adjusting, shrinking, just to keep someone who isn't fully choosing you. And people can feel that. They may not say it out loud, but they sense it in your energy, in your tone, in your actions. They sense that no matter what happens, you'll stay. And when someone feels that level of certainty, they stop fearing your absence. That's why this final shift is not about him anymore. It's about you. It's about becoming someone who is emotionally independent, someone who can love deeply but walk away when necessary, someone who can give but not at the cost of their own peace, someone who can stay but only where they are valued. Because once you reach that level, something powerful happens. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop overthinking every message. You stop trying to decode his behavior. You stop making excuses for things that clearly don't meet your standards. And instead, you start observing. You start choosing. You start deciding what stays in your life and what doesn't. And that shift, that internal shift, is what creates true presence. Because now when you walk into a room, you're not seeking attention. You're carrying value. Now, when you speak, you're not trying to impress. You're expressing. Now, when you give your time, it feels earned, because it is. Let me tell you something that hits deep. People don't fear losing someone who is always available. They fear losing someone who has options but chooses wisely. They fear losing someone who can walk away and actually does. They fear losing someone who is calm, grounded, and unshaken even when things don't go their way. And that's who you're becoming. Not louder, not colder, but stronger. There's a difference. Because strength is quiet. Strength doesn't need to prove anything. Strength doesn't need to announce itself. It simply exists, and everyone around it feels it. And that's the energy that changes everything. That's the energy that makes a man pause. That's the energy that makes him reflect. That's the energy that makes him realize, I could actually lose her. And once that thought becomes real, his actions begin to follow. Because now it's not about convenience anymore. It's about value. It's about effort. It's about stepping up or stepping aside. And this is where you must stay grounded. Because when he starts showing up differently, when he starts giving more attention, more effort, more consistency, you don't lose yourself in excitement. You don't rush back into old patterns. You don't forget the lessons that brought you here. You stay centered. You receive, but you also observe. You appreciate, but you also evaluate. Because real change is not proven in moments. It's proven in consistency. And if he truly values you, he will show it over time. Not just when he feels like he's losing you, but because he understands your worth. And if he doesn't, you won't need to force anything. You won't need to argue. You won't need to convince. You'll simply Let go with peace, with clarity, with self-respect. And that's the final level. That's where you no longer need to make anyone fear losing you because you're no longer trying to be held on to. You're standing in a place where you know if someone loses you, they lost something real. And you didn't lose anything because you never abandoned yourself again. And that is the most powerful position you can ever be in.